Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan. I am 38 years old. And even though years have passed, this story still makes my blood pressure spike every time I think about it. I grew up in what people like to call a blended family, but in our case, blended was just a polite way of saying barely holding together with tape and denial. My dad remarried when I was 14 to a woman named Diane, and from the moment she stepped into our lives, she made it perfectly clear that her kids were the center of the universe, and I was just the side quest that came with marrying my father. Diane had that special kind of smile, the one that looks warm from a distance but feels like a knife when you get close. She had two kids, Evan and Chloe, who could do no wrong in her eyes. Evan could crash her car into a mailbox, and she'd say he was just experimenting with responsibility. Chloe could fail three subjects in school, and Diane would say the teachers were jealous of her creativity. Meanwhile, if I forgot to rinse a dish, I'd get a speech about gratitude and how much she sacrifices. Still, I tried to be the good son. I worked after school, paid for most of my own college tuition, and helped my dad when he retired early because of back issues. I even chipped in for Diane's endless home projects, which were really just her excuse to buy expensive furniture she saw on Pinterest. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every family birthday, I showed up with gifts, food, and a smile. I never made a scene, even when I was treated like the background character in my own family story. Every year I'd get the same polite thank you while Diane beamed with pride over Evan's big promotion at the company his father-in-law owned. Fast forward to now, I'm married to Megan, who's 35, and we have two amazing kids. Lily, who's 8 and full of curiosity and sass, and Max, who's 6 and has a smile that can melt your worst day. We live about 40 minutes away from my dad and Diane, and honestly, that 40 minutes feels like a safe emotional buffer most days. I'll admit, I wasn't always the best father. I worked long hours, missed bedtime stories, and sometimes came home too tired to play. But this year, I decided to change that. I wanted to go all in for Halloween, my kids' favorite holiday. We went all out. I bought animatronic skeletons, fog machines, strobe lights, and a projector that made ghostly figures fly across the front yard. I even built a haunted tunnel from PVC pipes and black tarp that led to the candy table. It looked like something straight out of a theme park. Spooky, loud, and over the top in the best way possible. We invited the neighborhood kids, planned a costume contest, and set up a trick-or-treat donation drive for the local animal shelter. It was shaping up to be the perfect Halloween. Then Diane called. Her voice was syrupy sweet in that way it always is before she says something unpleasant. She said, Ryan, honey, I just wanted to remind you that we have a very large family gathering on Halloween, so don't come over, okay? We won't have space. At first I thought she meant dinner or something, so I told her, oh, no problem, we've got plans anyway. But then she continued, good, because I told the kids and grandkids to come to our house for trick-or-treating. We'll make sure everyone's covered. It took me a second to process what she was saying. I froze and asked, what do you mean you told everyone to come to your place? We were hosting this year. She laughed lightly and said, oh, Ryan, you know how crowded it gets. We'll do it next year, okay? That was it. Just like that, she had hijacked the entire family gathering. My cousins, my kids' cousins, everyone we'd invited. All the people my kids were excited to see were now going to her house instead. I could already see the look on Lily's face when she found out she wouldn't get to trick-or-treat with her cousins. When I told Megan, she sighed and said, that woman's allergic to you being happy. She was right. Diane always had a way of making sure the spotlight was on her house, her plans, her kids. The worst part was that my dad always went along with it, either too tired or too afraid to argue. Telling the kids was brutal. Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she asked if Grandma Diane didn't like her anymore. Max, in his little ghost costume that he'd been so excited about, looked up at me and asked, are we not invited to be family? Megan gave me a look that said, do not explode in front of them. I took a deep breath, hugged both of them, and promised we'd still have the best Halloween ever. But something inside me snapped that night. For years, I had been the one who sent money for every joint family expense. I paid for decorations, food, and party supplies, even when I wasn't hosting. Diane had turned family holidays into little fundraisers, and I'd been her biggest donor. Every event came with a price tag, and I always paid it without question because I wanted peace. Not this time. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat at my desk, opened my banking app, and stared at the list of automatic transfers. There it was. Every month like clockwork. $300 for joint gifts, $150 for party supplies, $100 for seasonal decorations. I canceled every single one of them. Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, all of it. Then I wrote a text to Diane that said, "Since we're not family enough to come on Halloween, I'll let you handle your large family holidays without our help. Have a good night." And I hit send. I put my phone face down and went to bed. Megan asked what I did, and I told her, "I just saved us about $1,000 in a headache." She smiled and said, "Best Halloween gift ever." The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. 32 missed calls, 8 from my dad, 10 from Diane, and the rest from relatives who apparently panicked because the money wasn't in yet. I just sat there in bed, letting it buzz. I could practically hear Diane's voice through the phone, that strained tone she gets when her perfect world starts cracking. I got up, made myself a cup of coffee, walked to the window, and pulled open the curtains. The yard was quiet, a light fog still clinging to the grass. My half-built haunted tunnel stood there waiting. Dark, crooked, and unfinished, but mine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt peaceful. I made coffee, opened the curtains to see my half-built haunted tunnel, and smiled. By noon that day, my dad finally got through after half a day of missed calls and ignored texts. His voice sounded tense, the kind of tone he used when he was caught between loyalty and guilt. He said he'd been talking to Diane all morning, trying to understand what happened, and she told him I was overreacting about Halloween. I told him the truth. I said I was done being the backup son, the walking wallet, the guy who got treated like an outsider until my debit card came out. I told him how it felt to constantly pay for people who never wanted me around. He sighed in that way only my father can, like he's too tired to have a real opinion, and said Diane was just trying to keep things organized. I told him that her version of organization involved cutting my kids and me out entirely. He went quiet, muttered something about a miscommunication, and hung up before I could respond. Not even an hour later, Megan's phone buzzed. It was Evan. Of course it was Evan, the golden child himself. He didn't waste time. He jumped straight into guilt-tripping mode, acting like Diane was some tragic victim of my sudden rebellion. He said everyone was pitching in for the party, and now their poor mother was stuck covering everything because I'd pulled out. Megan just gave him that calm, icy tone that could slice glass and told him Diane would survive because she'd been using her husband's generosity for years. Then she ended the call without another word, turned to me with this spark in her eyes, and said she wasn't going to let this slide. "You started this," she told me, "but I'm finishing it." And she meant it. Megan is the kind of woman who, when you cross her, doesn't scream or throw a fit. She plans, she strategizes, she wins quietly. So while Diane and her crew were still scrambling to figure out how to replace my holiday contributions, Megan and I went to war, politely, publicly, and with a smile. We doubled down on our own Halloween plans. We weren't just hosting a trick-or-treat stop anymore, we were hosting the event of the season. Megan created a Facebook event for our neighborhood, complete with photos of the decorations, the haunted tunnel, and the donation drive for the animal shelter. The post said something like, "Come join us for a spooky, family-friendly Halloween with games, prizes, and fun for everyone." It was cheerful, innocent, and completely public. Within hours, people started commenting and sharing it. Parents from the kids' school tagged their friends. Local businesses offered to donate candy and decorations. Even the community Facebook moderator pinned our event to the top of the page. The next morning, I woke up to my phone lighting up like a Christmas tree. Messages, RSVPs, people asking if they could bring food, neighbors volunteering to help set up. The entire street started buzzing with excitement. It wasn't just our house anymore, it was turning into a neighborhood movement. Megan had turned Diane's little act of exclusion into something that made us the center of attention. The good kind of attention. I spent that entire weekend turning our yard into something straight out of a horror movie. The haunted tunnel that had once been just a few PVC pipes and tarp became a full-blown experience. I lined the inside with flickering LED candles, hung fake cobwebs from the ceiling, and added sound effects that made it feel like ghosts were whispering right next to your ear. The fog machine filled the air with a low mist that made the whole place look like a graveyard. Megan set up tables for crafts, face painting, and cookie decorating. Lily and Max helped paint cardboard tombstones and stuffed scarecrows. For once, it felt like a family project. Not one where we were proving our worth to someone else, but one we were building for ourselves. Meanwhile, word got around fast. Diane's family-only Halloween suddenly wasn't sounding as fun as the big community event happening at our place. A few relatives messaged me privately saying things like, "Hey, are we still not invited?" Or, "The kids really want to come to yours. Diane's party sounds kind of quiet this year." I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't need to. The message had already spread on its own. By the time the week of Halloween rolled around, our driveway looked like a film set in progress. We had props, lighting rigs, piles of costumes, and stacks of candy bags lined up on the porch. Megan coordinated everything like she was directing a production. Neighbors walked by just to peek at what we were building. Kids rode their bikes past shouting that they couldn't wait to see it finished. And Lily and Max were practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. It felt like every ounce of effort I'd ever wasted trying to please my stepmother was finally being put towards something that actually mattered. Diane called once more that week. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying she didn't appreciate being made to look bad and that this isn't how family should behave. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Family in her world meant submission. Smiling while you're excluded, paying while you're ignored. I wasn't playing that game anymore. As Halloween drew closer, people started dropping off decorations and snacks for the event. One neighbor lent us a sound system, another brought a popcorn machine, and someone even volunteered to dress up as a zombie butler to greet guests. The kids on our street started practicing their costumes in our yard because it had become the place to be. The energy was contagious, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outsider of a family. I felt like the center of one. By the end of that week, Megan stood in the driveway, hands on her hips, surveying everything we had built. The lights were up, the fog machine was ready, the candy table was overflowing, and the haunted tunnel glowed an eerie green under the nightlights. The whole neighborhood was talking about it. I took a step back, looked at the scene, and realized that Diane had accidentally given me the push I needed to stop trying to fit into her world and start building my own. My yard looked like a movie set. Halloween night finally came, and I swear the air itself felt charged, crisp, cold, electric. It was the kind of night that makes every porch light glow brighter, and every sound carry a little further. I had been running around since sunrise, checking cords, replacing light bulbs, fixing last-minute details. Megan had transformed our garage into a mini carnival booth with games and prizes. Lily was in her witch costume perfecting her evil laugh. And Max was marching around as a tiny vampire, checking the candy table like a security guard on duty. The energy was pure chaos, the good kind that feels alive. By sundown, our street looked like something out of a Halloween movie. Orange lights wrapped around every tree, the fog machine hissed like a restless creature, and the haunted tunnel glowed with eerie green light. The air smelled of caramel corn, plastic costumes, and just the right hint of burnt fog fluid. Kids were screaming and laughing as they ran from house to house. Parents were drinking cider, chatting, and taking pictures in front of our setup. Every few minutes, another group arrived. It started with neighbors, then their friends, then friends of friends. Within an hour, it was a full-blown community event. And then word got around. Diane's family Halloween was a disaster. Apparently, she had spent the entire week bragging about her exclusive family gathering. But when everyone realized how big our event had become, most of them bailed. A couple of my cousins even showed up at our place, dressed up and looking a little sheepish. They admitted Diane's party was awkward and quiet. No decorations, no music, no kids playing, just a few adults sitting around the kitchen table eating store-bought cupcakes. The moment they heard laughter coming from our direction, they decided to just stop by. I didn't say anything, I just waved them in. From that point on, it was pure magic. Our front yard turned into a blur of movement, flashing lights, echoing laughter, and camera flashes everywhere. Parents posed with their kids in front of our giant inflatable spider. Teenagers dared each other to walk through the haunted tunnel without screaming, and someone started playing Halloween music from their car speakers, which somehow blended perfectly with the spooky soundtrack we already had running. Megan was everywhere at once, making sure the games had enough prizes and the candy didn't run out. She looked so happy, the kind of happy that comes from building something that means something. At one point, a group of people I didn't recognize showed up with camera equipment. I assumed it was some hobbyist until one of them mentioned they were from a local news station. They said they'd seen our event mentioned online and wanted to do a short feature for the evening broadcast. I almost laughed because I realized Diane was probably at home fuming while our little rebellion was being filmed for television. They interviewed Megan for a quick segment, took shots of the decorations, and even filmed Lily and Max handing out candy to younger kids. The reporter said it was one of the best neighborhood displays they'd seen in years. I didn't say it out loud, but deep down it felt like poetic justice. The night kept rolling, and by 8 o'clock our driveway looked like a small festival. Kids were sitting on the grass comparing candy hauls, parents were sipping coffee and cider from thermoses, and someone had brought their guitar to play light acoustic versions of Halloween songs. The neighborhood Facebook page exploded with photos. People were tagging us, thanking us, saying how it felt like the kind of Halloween they used to have as kids. And through all of it, I felt this warm, grounding sense of satisfaction. Like every ounce of frustration I'd swallowed over the years was dissolving under the glow of orange lights. Then, through the crowd, I saw someone standing awkwardly near the end of the driveway. It was my dad. He was holding a half-eaten cupcake and looking completely out of place, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there. For a moment, I thought he'd just turn around and leave, but he didn't. He stood there quietly watching Lily chase Max around the yard, both of them laughing so hard they could barely breathe. When he finally stepped closer, he looked around at everything, the lights, the decorations, the kids, and asked if I had done all this. I told him I had, and that it turns out family doesn't need an invitation. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just nodded slowly, taking it all in. Then he said that Diane was mad. Of course she was. And I told him she could take a number. Something in that line must have hit him just right, because he actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not the tired kind of laugh I'd heard from him over the years. A real, full, genuine laugh. It caught me off guard. It was the first time I'd seen him smile like that in months, and for the first time in a long while, he looked like my dad again. He actually laughed for the first time in months. 2 weeks after Halloween, the rush of the holiday had faded, but the glow still lingered. The decorations were half down, the fog machine was tucked away in the garage, and the projector still hung from the porch because I couldn't bring myself to take it down. Every night when I came home from work, I'd see the faint outline of the ghost still flickering across the siding, and it reminded me that for once, I hadn't just survived one of Diane's power plays, I'd won. Then the phone rang. The caller ID flashed her name. Diane. For a solid minute, I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. I didn't want to deal with her voice, that particular mix of fake sweetness and condescension that always managed to crawl under my skin. But curiosity won. I wanted to hear what she had to say after the chaos she'd caused. She didn't waste time pretending everything was fine. She started with her usual clipped tone, saying she wanted to clear the air. According to her, I had embarrassed the family by making such a public spectacle on Halloween. She said people were talking, that my event made her look bad. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the pumpkin centerpiece still sitting on the counter, and told her she didn't need my help to look bad. She managed that all on her own when she told her grandkids not to come. There was silence on the other end, the kind that fills every corner of the room. Then she changed tactics. She said Dad wanted everyone together for Thanksgiving, like old times. I said if that was true, he was welcome to come to my house. She didn't respond. Just an icy pause, then a curt goodbye. I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Thanksgiving morning arrived, cold and bright. Megan was in full cooking mode before the sun was even up. The house smelled like butter, garlic, and roasted turkey. Lily and Max were bouncing between the kitchen and the living room, setting up little handmade decorations for the table. The air felt lighter this year, No tight deadlines, no fake smiles, no endless phone calls about money. Just family. My family. Then around noon, I heard a car door outside. I looked through the window and froze. It was my dad. Alone. He was carrying a foil-covered pie tin and looking around like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to be there. I stepped out onto the porch before he could knock. He looked up, gave a small nod, and said he brought pumpkin pie, just like he used to when Mom was alive. For a second, it hit me how long it had been since something as simple as that had felt normal. I stepped aside and told him to come in. Lunch turned into dinner because no one wanted to leave the table. The kids told stories about school. Megan made her famous mashed potatoes that everyone went back for twice. And Dad sat quietly, smiling like he hadn't done in years. We didn't talk about Diane. We didn't have to. The absence of her name at the table was the most peaceful sound I'd ever heard. At one point, Lily asked her grandpa to help carve the turkey, and I watched him show her how to hold the knife just right, his hands steady, his eyes soft. It was the first time I'd seen him look comfortable in my house. The tension that always came with family gatherings, the forced politeness, the unspoken rules, the undercurrent of resentment, it was gone. That night felt like reclaiming a part of my childhood that Diane had tried to rewrite. When he left, Dad hugged the kids, hugged Megan, and then looked at me for a long second before saying that it had been a really good day. I could see in his face that he wasn't just talking about the meal. Something had shifted. He might not ever confront Diane about it, but in his own quiet way, he'd chosen a side. The next morning, Megan was scrolling through Facebook while we were cleaning up leftovers. She stopped suddenly and tilted her phone toward me. It was a post from Diane. She had written, "Some people forget who took care of them growing up." Underneath, Evan had commented, "Some people forget who paid for it." The two of them were having their little pity party online for everyone to see. I could feel my jaw tighten, but Megan just smirked and handed me my coffee. She didn't say anything, and she didn't have to. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I didn't even roll my eyes. Instead, I walked outside, the morning air crisp and clean, and looked at the faint decorations still left from Halloween. The projector was still plugged in, and I turned it on. The same ghostly shapes began to dance across the porch, the same ones that had lit up our yard on the night Diane's world had started to crack. I stood there for a while, sipping my coffee, watching the lights flicker across the siding. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving a point or getting even. It was about finally stepping out of someone else's shadow. For years, I had been trying to earn approval from people who never wanted to give it, trying to be a part of a family that only existed on their terms. But standing there with my own home glowing behind me and the sounds of my kids laughing inside, I realized something simple and liberating. I didn't need their approval. I never did. Family isn't the one you're told to keep. It's the one that feels like home when you walk through the door. I took another sip of coffee, let out a long breath, and watched the lights shimmer against the morning fog. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the backup son. I just felt free. Sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. It's about finally stepping out of someone's shadow and realizing your own light looks a whole lot better without their darkness in it.